Today, we're diving deep into the machinery that powers the world's largest democracy. I want you to think of the Indian Constitution not just as some dry legal text, but as the actual operating system for a nation of over 1.4 billion people. We're going to look at the blueprint itself, how India's run, who runs it, and crucially, how it's held accountable. So let's just start with that massive question. How on earth do you build an operating system for a country with that kind of scale and diversity? Well, the framers of the Indian Constitution had to answer that exact question. And the articles we're about to discuss, which you'll know are central to your Constitutional Law 2 syllabus, are their incredibly thoughtful and, yes, often complex answers. So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the so-called steel frame, the people who actually run the state. Then we'll see how the Constitution creates a single unified market. After that, we'll get into a big one. Can you actually sue the government? And finally, we'll look at the ultimate watchdog, the guardian of our elections. Okay, let's get right into the mechanics. Think of this as us opening up the hood of the Indian state. We're not just looking at theories, we're looking at the actual gears and levers that make the government tick day in and day out. These are the provisions that turn big constitutional ideas into reality on the ground. So who actually runs the day-to-day business of the government? You know, it's not just the politicians who come and go. The Constitution planned for a permanent professional bureaucracy, a group designed to keep things stable and moving forward no matter who's in power. This is what we call the steel frame. Right, this term, steel frame, refers to the All India Services, or AIS. Now, these services are a pretty unique feature of India's federal system. They're designed to be the glue that holds the country's huge administrative machinery together, making sure there's a uniform standard and a national perspective across all states. And the structure here is just fascinating. Article 312 establishes these three core services: the IAS for administration, the IPS for policing, and the IFS for forests. But the real genius is in the dual control system. The central government recruits the officers, but then they're sent to work in specific state governments. This gives them deep local expertise, but because they're ultimately accountable to the union, it helps keep them neutral and shielded from purely local political pressures. It's a really delicate balancing act. Okay, but how do you actually find the best people for this incredibly important steel frame? How do you make sure that the folks getting these jobs are chosen based on merit, not on who they know? Well, the Constitution's answer was to create independent, powerful bodies to act as the gatekeepers. And you'll find that answer in Articles 315 to 323. This is what sets up the Union Public Service Commission, the UPSC, and the various state PSCs. Now, the key thing to remember is that these aren't just any government agencies. They are independent constitutional bodies. Their power and independence are literally baked into the Constitution itself, all to ensure that hiring is fair, transparent, and based on merit. So their job is huge, and it goes way beyond just setting exams. They advise the government on everything, from the best ways to recruit people to handling promotions, transfers, and even disciplinary issues. They are, for all intents and purposes, the HR backbone for the entire civil service, responsible for maintaining its quality and integrity. All right, let's switch gears. We've talked about the people running the state. Now let's talk about the economic playground they operate in. A massive goal for the Constitution's framers was to tear down all the economic walls between states and create one single unified national market. And boom, there it is, Article 301. It's such a simple but incredibly powerful statement. This one clause is the legal foundation for India as a single economic zone. It means states can't just put up barriers to protect their own industries. It guarantees that goods, services, and people can move freely, which is absolutely essential for national growth. Now, here's a really interesting contrast. So while Article 301 gives all this economic freedom to the people, Article 299 puts a very tight leash on the government itself. When the state wants to sign a business contract, it can't just act like any private company. Nope, it has to follow a very strict, formal process to make sure every single deal is transparent and accountable to the public. And I want to be clear, these rules under Article 299 are not just suggestions, they are mandatory. Every single government contract has to be in writing, it has to be officially in the name of the president or the governor, and it has to be signed by someone with the proper authority. As the Supreme Court made crystal clear in the Big Reg Jaipuria case, if you miss even one of these steps, the contract is totally void. It's not red tape, it's a vital shield for public money. This brings us to a really fundamental question about accountability. What happens when the government or one of its employees messes up? Can you hold the state responsible for the harm it causes? just like you would with any other person or company. So, let's make this real. Imagine a postal service truck crashes into your car, or a poorly managed public construction project damages your house. Can you do anything about it? Well, the answer is yes, but it's complicated. The Constitution, in Article 300, gives us the framework for this. The legal term for this is tortious liability. A tort is just a civil wrong, an act that causes someone harm or loss. Article 300 says that yes, the government can be sued for the torts committed by its employees. But, and this is a big but, the courts have drawn a very important line in the sand. And this is the line that decides everything, a concept really hammered out in cases like History Law v. State of UP. The courts make a distinction between sovereign and non-sovereign functions. Sovereign functions are things only the state can do. Defense, foreign policy, policing. For acts committed while doing these things, the state is generally immune. But for non-sovereign functions, things a private person could also do, like running a transport service or a hospital, the state can be held liable for negligence, just like anyone else. Okay, finally, let's talk about the ultimate tool of accountability in any democracy, the power of the people to vote their government in or out. How does the Constitution make sure that this process is actually free, fair, and something we can all trust? The answer is Article 324. This creates the Election Commission of India, or the ECI. And the key words here, taken right from the Constitution, are superintendence, direction, and control. Those three words give the ECI sweeping authority over the entire election process. It's an autonomous body specifically designed to be independent of the government of the day to ensure it can be an impartial referee. And its powers are absolutely vast. I mean, the ECI doesn't just count votes. It decides when elections happen, it prepares all the voter lists, it recognizes political parties, it enforces a code of conduct to make sure campaigning is ethical, and it can even cancel an entire election if things go seriously wrong. It is the rulemaker, the referee, and the enforcer for the biggest democratic show on earth. And for that very reason, the Election Commission is rightly called the cornerstone of India's democracy. You really can't overstate its importance in ensuring peaceful transfers of power, and most importantly, in maintaining the public's trust in the whole system. It's the mechanism that makes the promise of accountable government real. So, as we wrap this up, I hope it's clear that these aren't just a random collection of rules. They all fit together. They form an intricate blueprint designed to strike a very delicate balance, to create a state that's powerful enough to govern effectively, but one that is also disciplined, accountable, and ultimately answers to the will of the people. So let's just put it all together one last time. You've got the All India Services and the PSCs to provide the professional staff to run the state. You've got Article 301 to create one big economic playground for everyone. You have Article 300 to hold the state legally responsible when it makes mistakes. And you have the Election Commission to give the citizens the final word. It's a complete interlocking system. And that brings us to our final thought for the day. This amazing, complex machine was designed over 75 years ago. As India barrels into the 21st century with all its new challenges, economic, social, technological, the big question we have to ask is this: is this original blueprint still the right one for the future? That's something to think about. Thanks for joining me.